Well, here's something your brain is doing right now that you probably don't know about. It is taking every random, chaotic, accidental thing that has ever happened to you and is it stitching them into story. A coherent, logical, sequential story. One where everything makes sense, where one thing led to another, where you were always heading somewhere. The problem is that's not what actually happened. We are wired neurologically, culturally, systemically to believe that life should follow a line. Study, qualify, specialize, climb, arrive. And when it doesn't, when the detour shows up, when the unexpected chapter begins, we treat it as failure, as deviation, as something to fix. But what if the detour is the design? My guest today is Dr. Audrey Tang, Chartered Psychologist, leadership trainer, award winning author, and someone whose own life is a masterclass in not following the script. We are going to talk about why our obsession with the linear path might be the single most limiting belief we carry, and what happens when you finally let go of it. This is the Growth Hacking Culture Podcast. Welcome, Audrey.
Thank you so much for having me, Ivan. This is such a great conversation.
I have so many things to tell you because the topic talks to me, to my personal story. So before we get into your story, why do you think humans default to linear thinking is goes in the first place? And when I say linear, I mean that deeply embedded belief that life should follow a sequence, that there is a correct order to things, and deviating from it means you have failed or fallen behind. Is that a brain thing, a culture thing, or are we just fundamentally terrified of ambiguity?
Mix of all those three things. Whilst you were talking, whilst you were doing the introduction, I was drawing this little picture that I remember from A-level psychology. Most of us will see a triangle. Most of us will be able to see a triangle in that shape. It's three happy eaters, if you remember Happy Eater from the UK, or three Pac-Men, but it's not a triangle. However, there's a term in Gestalt psychology that the whole is greater than the sum of all of its parts. And our brain likes to make sense of things. And so our brain is just filled in the gaps. That looks like a triangle. That's got to be a triangle. We don't stop and question it. So our brain is already trying to fill in a narrative that has gaps in it anyway. However, you talked about conditioning and culture. That's a huge thing. If your parents I'm a great example of this. My parents were teachers. My dad's side worked in a school. My mum's side were teachers. Guess what I became? There we are. It's because you follow what you know. And even in storytelling, there's the idea, I think there's 37 different storylines, but those storylines are still linear. B follows A, C follows B, and so on. And we kind of feel a bit dissatisfied when we haven't got that conclusion to a story we're expecting. And so there's partly conditioning, but there's also partly our brains just like to fill in the gaps. All we need to do is think about a song. I'm just trying to think of, so if I just go twinkle, twinkle, little, and then move on, everyone's going, star, star, twinkle, twinkle, little star. You must end it. Otherwise it feels odd. So there is something in us that makes us want to complete things. And maybe that's not a bad thing.
When you're talking about what you were mentioning, kind of the past history, so linearity of the history that make us forecast the future. And then I was thinking about it. This is something that I read back in the days about expectations of human being, and it's very often because of the expectations that we have for the future that we are unhappy. That means that we are always dreaming of, I'm going to be happy when I get my title in the university, or when I get my first million, or my Cadillac. You're great, so Cadillacs. So we are always delaying. So for the future, we are always delaying this sense of, I know what I have today. It might not be linear, but we believe that there is a linearity that when we finish something, or when I get married, I have heard that when I get married, I'm going to be happier. And at the end, studies show that in reality, we are not as happy when the reality happens. We believe that we will be happy. Is there a correlation between this thing that humans do? I think animals don't do it. I will ask my dog, but I don't think so.
I know. Dogs seem to be able to live in the present, and it's wonderful. What I always tell my clients is happiness is a state. It is not a goal. So if we are going, oh, I will be happy when, actually there's nothing to stop you being happy now. And that's why Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology, talked a lot about the practice of gratitude, recognizing what we have right now. Not only does it ground us in the present, but it makes us more appreciative of what we have already. And once we start doing that, we actually recognize more and more things. We prime our mind to think of more and more things that also give us that sense of positivity and happiness. So the first thing is happiness is a state. We don't need to have achieved anything in order to get the happiness. And actually, if you think back to that achievement, I almost guarantee the first feeling you experience is not happiness, it's relief. I got it. I did it. And that's just worth holding on to, because if that's the case, then it's a lie we've been telling ourselves. I'll be happy when. No, I'll be relieved when. Maybe that's truthful, but I can be happy right now. And that's the really important thing. And that's why gratitude is such an important practice to include in our day to day.
Two things. One, you made me think about this feeling that I had the day I got my title as an engineer. I hated my life during the 5 years of studying engineering, by the way. So I wasn't happy. I was kind of sad and relieved. I couldn't, and I was expecting that I was going to be proud of that I did it, because this military looking university where I went, it was painful. Didn't have fun at all. I was studying all the time. Number one, the thing is that our human brain makes that the majority of people that I know, they don't make this little time for the right now, because you need to take a breath and understand it, to feel it. But nobody makes time for the right now. It's almost like we fight with it now. We prefer the past, where we were, oh, it was so good when my mother was taking care of me, or it's going to be awesome when I married this German model or whatsoever in the future. Isn't it? Nobody makes time for it now.
It's also because we don't understand what we mean by happy. So what I would ask somebody is, if you're saying, I will be happy when I've lost weight, I will be happy when I get my doctorate, whatever, what do you mean by that? What do you actually mean by happy? Is it going to change the way you think? Is it going to change the way you behave? Is it going to change the way you live your life? Because if you don't really know what happiness means to you, other than actually it's a feeling, I come back to my earlier point of, well, you can feel that right now. So I think what we really need to be asking ourselves is, okay, how will my life change when I've achieved whatever, but not call it happiness? Then it becomes a very practical tool, and that's potentially helpful to us. But if we are delaying this concept of happy, then I don't believe we're ever going to find happiness, because happiness is just that immediate feeling. But what we also need to be very mindful of is the well-being sphere has become a little bit saturated lately. A lot of people are talking about well-being who may or may not have the credentials to do so. And one of the key things there is a lot of the posts are about being joyful and thriving all the time. No one can do that. It is not humanly possible. And actually, it's not healthy, because when you think about the ebb and flow of life, you need the low bits to really appreciate the high bits. But also, and I know we say this when it comes to mental health, we say it's not okay to not be okay, but it is okay to be okay. And okay is fine. It's okay to be satisfied. It's okay to be, yeah, I'm good. I feel at peace. I don't feel I need to run for anything. I don't need to set myself any goals just yet. I'm just going to mooch around for a couple of days. That's okay too. And actually, I find that like happiness.
Indeed. Now, one of the elements of happiness is the element of experience. I have always heard this story that it's not about having something. It's not about the Louis Vuitton bag that I want. That sounds weird. I don't want a Louis Vuitton bag, but it is about how am I going to use whatever I get and how I'm going to feel it. It's experience. And now I have the impression that for having an experience, we need to have moments that are not planned, because an experience comes very often from an opportunity. An opportunity by default is something unexpected. It's not something planned. Let me get back to you. So looking at your own path, what point did you realize the plan wasn't the plan and that there was many opportunities to grab? Tell me a little bit more about your story.
It's a really nice question because in some ways, my plan in a way has been to, I think, have as much fun as possible through life. And in a way, I'm doing that. But my parents' plan was a little bit different. And I think that's where we sometimes need to understand when we're living our life, are we playing the lead character in our story or are we playing a supporting role in somebody else's? And if it's the latter, if our parents have written a script, and there is a brilliant, brilliant book by Oliver James. I know you did say we're allowed to swear. It is called They Hook You Up, Your Mum and Dad. And it's from a poem by Philip Larkin, but it's a great book because it talks about parental scripts and parents, right from the name they give us a particular script to follow. And I'm a great example. I was called Audrey because my mum loved Audrey Hepburn. And Audrey Hepburn was graceful and delicate and beautiful. And I am not any of those things. I don't think that's a good name for me. And so right from the start, I would actually say, this doesn't sit properly with me. And I think I've always been relatively rebellious, relatively questioning over what can happen. But I did say earlier, I became a teacher. But that's also because sometimes when our parents or people that we respect or spend a lot of time with have followed a certain pathway, that pathway is very well trodden. So it's very easy to get the achievements on that pathway because someone knows. If you'd said to me even 10 years ago, actually you'd be a podcaster or you'd be hosting sessions on Riverside or Zoom or whatever it might be, I wouldn't have understood what that meant. What is a Zoom? And it's because something unfamiliar to us, it's not as easy to follow because you don't know what success looks like. And you kind of feel what failure looks like a lot more because people question you. If it's not in their landscape either, they'll start saying, what do you want to do that for? How are you going to make any money? How's that going to work for you? Everybody else is doing, and we get fed this critical voice. And so one of the things I would always say to my clients is ask themselves, well, whose voice is that? When you are being criticized, whose voice are you hearing? Is it yours? Or is it a parent? Is it a grandparent? Is it a teacher? Is it somebody else saying, oh, no, don't follow that pathway? Because that's much more about their fears and their lack of understanding than it is for yours. So I think from the start, I was always pushing boundaries a little bit. It was quite funny because my husband even said to me recently, so this is where the name Audrey becomes relevant. He said, the thing is though, with you, you've actually always been audacious. And that is partly in your name. And I thought, wow, that's a better way of looking at it. So I think I've always tried to just, even within the confines of where I was, I would push a little bit further. As a teacher, I pushed to take a school trip to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I pushed and we were part of a Guinness World Record. I pushed and we got my students to perform on a West End stage. Even in confines, you can push. You don't have to be satisfied with what you have. But there is one more thing I would add in my own personal experience. I personally always wanted to act. But at the time I was growing up, because I'm a similar age to you, Ivan, there were no people that looked like me on television. And so it wasn't ever in that wheelhouse for me. Then the musical Miss Saigon came along. And when I went to stage school, and I only stayed there for a term because I went back and did my A-levels instead, that was the only thing people would consider me for. And I think the best example of how limited other people's landscapes are is that I'm quite a good performer, but I played the princess in Aladdin for 3 productions in 1 year. That's all I got. I didn't even get Aladdin, actually, but I was the princess 3 times in 1 year. And then I thought, no, if I'm going to want to play different roles, I'm going to have to build the production myself.
So I have the impression that in order to do what you have done, so let's say that you had a pretty linear life planned partially by society, parents, friends, whatsoever. And then suddenly something ignited and you decided, what if I take this road? What if I try something? The definition of failing is not the same for you or for me or for someone else who is scared, somewhere in their side, and they want to keep their, sometimes they can call it boring job or not. Might be also exciting. So what is your definition of failure when you are trying to do something that you don't know anything about, something that maybe you were feeling a little bit more at ease with your studies, your standard studies. How do you define failure for you?
I always let's talk about success. And the definition of success is achievement of a goal. So for me, I guess the definition of failure is not achieving that particular goal. But what I've found is I may not have achieved that goal, but I've achieved a different one instead. And maybe that has started me on the springboard to either a better goal or somehow back round to the goal I originally wanted. So a good example of this is I wanted to write a book. So after my PhD, I wanted to write a book, and I wrote to hundreds of publishers, and I got 3 replies and that's it, So majority of people didn't even want to bother with me. And out of those 3 replies, 2 of which were outright rejections. One of them was from Pearson. Now, Pearson has published 4 of my books now. But Pearson said to me, first of all, "We love your writing. We don't want you to write that book. We want you to write this book." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then I had to ask myself the question, do I want to write or do I want to write that particular book? And the answer in my head was, I want to be a published author. I actually don't mind what the topic is. I'm not so consumed by my own ego that I have to write this particular book. If you want me to cut my teeth and learn how to write using your framework, I will do that. And that is Be a Great Manager Now. It turns out, following that book, I then had the opportunity to pitch a book I wanted to write, and so on. And now we've got to the stage where my most recent book, The Leader's Guide to Wellbeing, which won the book award for wellness, which is yay. I was very excited. That was completely my voice. That was what I wanted to say about well-being. It was in the style I completely wanted to write. And that's how I got back to where I want it to be. But sometimes you have to go through a different path first. But it's about not letting your ego get in the way.
But then we humans have a bloody problem that has been rooted in the society. It's about the way we fix scores. So let me tell you, for instance, in the corporate world, goals is about I want to achieve plus 20% plus of sales in my department. I want to keep expenses at this amount. So this is reproducing in our heads when we imagine the future. So we are imagining a picture, a fixed picture of what we want to get. And that's the tricky thing. We want to get that specific picture instead of replacing that by an image about either how I feel, and that's what matters, in fact, because happiness is about how we feel. It's not about the fucking number going around. Is that correct? Am I somewhere? Yeah.
You are 100% there. And that is where I understand in many ways in work, it's very reductionist in that you probably can measure it. My goal is to sell X number of machines a month. Did I meet the goal or didn't I? I think that's fair enough, but that's reducing life to one specific task. And we can't reduce our life to that task. It's more important to understand that work principles work on quite restricted situations. We can't start applying that into real life. And so if we get so fixed on, I must have this particular type of car and this particular type of steering and this particular color, we might actually miss out on a better car, which was just a different color. However, this is where there's some truth in vision boards. I'm not talking about law of attraction. I'm just talking about priming your mind. So if, for example, you're looking for a new house and you have non-negotiables, and non-negotiables are okay because they're like setting boundaries. You have the non-negotiable, it's going to have a double garage, or it's going to have a garden, or it's going to have 3 bedrooms, or whatever that is. The non-negotiables are there. But if you can be a bit more open with, I don't mind where it is, or I don't mind the cost, or whatever those other more flexible areas are. What you have done is you've primed your mind to look out for more of those particular things. It's the same sort of thing as saying, well, don't think of a pink elephant. You're going to think of a pink elephant. It's just as simple as that. And you're going to see more pink elephants. So if you have gone and said, I want a house, you will be so overwhelmed with information that actually that's not helpful because you won't know where to start. But if you say, I want a house and it's going to have these parameters and it's okay to have them, then you're more likely to see more that fit that particular concept. And if you're willing to be open, you may realize that there is better out there. This is why meditations and affirmations often say, I'm open to what I want or better than I expect.
This word open makes me think about curiosity, which is kind of something that is related to our topic because it's what helps us avoid linearity and sometimes regret about our lives. At my age, I meet a lot of people that are a little bit slightly older than me, and I can feel in the tone of voice by the things that they tell me that they have regrets because they wanted to follow the trap where we we have been for so many years, like in systems like school, linearity, university, linearity, career ladder, linearity. According to you, what's the point where the structure stops being useful for us to feel fulfilled and becomes like a cognitive trap where we don't see options anymore? We lose the curiosity and then we don't try this crazy things that happens in life and that makes our life worthwhile telling to our grandchildren, to our daughters, to feel proud because you don't feel proud if you have 1 million in the bank. You feel proud when you tell stories that nobody else has told you people before.
I think that's beautiful, and you're absolutely right. I actually believe, though, that the real trap we're falling into at the moment is not recognizing that things are not linear. So what I see a lot of is the change in my teaching. I used to teach a lot of employability skills in universities, and the common theme there would be to teach, well, where is your profession going to be in 3 years' time? And then plan for that and go and do all of those things to prepare you for that particular profession. However, now first of all, there's so many professions that are coming up that never existed and may not exist now, but could exist in 3 years' time. And secondly, there is no or not as much linearity anymore. It's not so much the job for life. And even for those people who believe they have a job for life, things can happen and suddenly that job for life has disappeared, whether it's AI turning up, whether it was the pandemic, whether it was any form of something changing and people having to respond in the moment. And so what worries me now actually is the trap that we think it is going to be linear. If I work really hard at X, Y, and Z, this will happen, because it won't all the time. That belief that things are just going to be on the same track means we don't start planning for other eventualities. We don't plan for other things that might happen. And I think that's a problem. There was a great article published in Harvard Business Review, and it was called Why Leaders Don't Learn from Success. And I think it's a similar trap we fall into. When things succeed, we go, well, of course it did, because there we go. Let's go on to the next goal. What we actually need to do is we need to stop and say, well, which part of that success was mine? Which part of that success is replicable? Which part of that success was just the planets aligned at the right time? You know, people right now, I'm in the UK, it's very hot. We're in the middle of a heat wave. Air conditioning units doing really, really well. But I will guarantee you, like myself, at the last heat wave, we all went, it won't be another one. It'll be fine. And now we're all going, I wish I bought one earlier. We do need to think about what actually have I contributed to that I can replicate if everything around me doesn't go to plan.
That's a good one. Now, what do you have to unlearn psychologically to be able to say yes to things that didn't fit the script? To be open for these opportunities because they're there, but it doesn't mean that we're going to grab them.
Yeah. I actually believe this is a lot more to do with building confidence and the space in which those opportunities arise, because it's very easy to offer opportunities to someone. But if that opportunity for them is nothing, it's completely unrelated to everything that they've done before, why on earth would they want to grab that opportunity? Because they can't see a pathway through it. So let's just take this to the opportunity of, I don't know, winning a year's free gym membership. And, you know, you want to lose weight and that's great, exciting. Why aren't you taking it? Well, that's a question that Dr. Katarina Schneider is asking at the Center of Appearance Research. Yeah, the gym's there. There's all of this opportunity there. Anyone can get fitter. Why aren't people doing it? Well, you've got to then think about that person. So she talks about, well, the person who's overweight has been living with this for some time. They have been living with potentially other people, calling them names, shaming them. They not really understanding what it's like to live in a larger body. And then they go to the space in which they're supposed to get fitter. And first of all, there's nothing cute that fits them. So they don't even feel nice working out. So that's already a barrier before you get there. Or there's trainers that don't support the way that they balance. So that's another problem. Then they get to the gym and they can't maneuver in between the equipment, and it's embarrassing again. And so what we're actually doing is we're going, oh, there's tons of opportunities, but we're not creating the space for somebody to actually succeed and take up those opportunities. And as a teacher, that's something I do recognize, because we always create the space in our learning environment. Our learning environment has to allow people to fail. It has to allow people to hold on to the sides in order to find their feet. It has to allow for people to ask questions and try and then go wrong and try again. But as adults, we go straight into a training session and then we're told by our work, right, well, you've been to the training. You should know how to do that. No time for failure. We need to create a space that allows people to experiment. So I think there's a lot more to do with the environment saying yes to us or helping us say yes, rather than the individual saying yes, because so much work focuses on the individual, but that's only half the story.
What you just mentioned is, for me, is almost like, how do we grab the existing opportunities? Now, because of my personal life, I'm a little bit convinced that there is a parallel way, which is the one to go and take the path less travel. Like, imagine that you go with your family to Florence, there is all the tourists going in the main road, and suddenly you decide, I'm going to take this small street. And then you have the time of your life because you have found a nice, so genuine restaurant in Florence, and then some people that are fun, and finally, even some British who are fun in that street, which is rare, right? Listen, so, and I have the impression that we need also to be able to train ourselves to sometimes deviate of the standard path and just take it just to see what happens. You are still on control of that path. You can come back, right?
Yeah, very much so. This is an exercise that I do with my clients. We often stick in the comfort zone, which is here. And we like the comfort zone. It is called the comfort zone for a reason. It's comfortable. We like it. We know it. We understand it. Beyond the comfort zone is something called the stretch zone. And the stretch zone, it's a little bit like exercising. If you stretch, it pulls that muscle a little bit, but it feels quite nice, actually, if you do it a few times and you practice at it. But if you go too far, then you pull something and you hurt yourself, you get into the panic zone. And the panic zone sends us straight back to the comfort zone because it's horrible out there and we don't want to do it. So I love using your analogy. You could have somebody who decides, oh, I'm going to go my own way. I'll stay away from the tourist spots and in Florence, but then they get mugged and then they get robbed and then they lose their passport and then it all just goes wrong and then they panicked and they'll go, I'll never go off the tourist part again. And so what we need to do is every day do one thing that pushes us into the stretch zone. Just one thing. It might be, I'm going to go a different route home from work, or I'm going to, I don't know, have dessert before my lunch, before my savor, something that as an adult, I'm allowed to do that if I want to. I'm going to set a boundary. I'm going to do whatever it is that just makes you feel that little bit uncomfortable, because then we get used to feeling uncomfortable. And soon what used to be the stretch zone actually becomes part of our comfort zone, which means that the new stretch is what we would have thought was the panic zone. And if we're doing those little incremental things each time, we're building up knowledge, we're building up experience. And one of the most important pieces of experience is that actually, if it goes wrong, I can get out of it. I can sort myself out. I can solve my problem. And that is probably the biggest fear, is if it goes wrong, what do I do? And if we've learned, actually, if I'm stretching every single day, I've built up a set of skills that just means I can face more. That makes us braver.
I love that. Definitely, I truly believe in what you just said. So experience generate a new set of skills. What we call gut feelings is not like something that is magic that comes from the sky. It is the power of our brain to extrapolate experience. Without the experience, without daring the next time a little bit more, we cannot know if that street of Florence is going to be full of robbers, right?
Yeah, yeah. We can't predict. I think one of the problems that we have in life is we like it in a way, we like predictability, but actually predictability can walk a fine line between that and mundane. And when it's mundane, we then go, so we also talk about the window of tolerance. Now, this is a phrase borrowed from trauma research. So I'm not diminishing its use. I'm just using it as a metaphor. The idea of the window of tolerance is that we all have a different window, and we can, if it pushes us too much, it becomes overwhelming and we get anxious and we panic and we get burnt out. But if something is just not interesting enough, it pushes into the sort of more meh, can't do this. And that can be just as unhealthy for us. So a lot of us live our lives within that window of tolerance. But if we start practicing pushing our boundaries a little bit, we begin to realize we can do more without going into panic and being overwhelmed. But also we begin to understand when, do you know what? This is just not enough for me. I need more than this, because it can be just as unhealthy staying somewhere which has gone stale rather than actually moving on. We talk about silver divorces now in the UK, getting divorced at sort of 50, 60, 70 even, and starting afresh. And actually, if it gives you that opportunity to thrive, whether it is with somebody else or on your own, take it. Because otherwise, what's the other alternative? You just go more and more into that stalemate, more and more into that, ugh. And is it not worth giving yourself the chance to feel happy?
Like this sentence, there is more than this. We usually, thinking back, I chose engineering because I was good at math. Now, and we tend to replicate that. We stay into doing something because we are good at something. And then there is what we always hear. We tell young people to follow their passion. I have even done that to one of my kids. The other one, no, I don't talk to the other one. As if passion is something you find, in fact, not something you build by doing unexpected things. Because we cannot know what is our passion, especially when we're kids. I chose engineering because I didn't know anything better. So is that advice, in fact, to follow your passion? Is it something that is harmful or not?
It can be, because there has been research which shows that certain types of passion can lead to obsession, and that is not healthy for us. And so just to show you what happens when it goes over the other side, you might take an athlete. So you've got two athletes, one who just enjoys playing football and does it because they love playing, and that's great. Then you've got the other athlete who is wanting to play at national level and they have to practice. And if they miss a practice, it suddenly creates a lot of anxiety. That's not healthy. That becomes obsessive passion. So that can be very problematic for people as well. If passion creeps into obsession, a better question or a better statement perhaps is asking somebody to follow their purpose. And it's maybe understanding what's meaningful to them. And what we've always been taught as teachers is not to ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? But actually ask them, what problems do you want to solve? And the answers become quite different, because you can ask somebody, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they'll say, I want to be a vet. And like you said, linear progression, you take biology, you take animal husbandry, you take all of these things, and this is how your pathway to becoming a vet is. But when you talk to that child and you ask them, okay, what problems do you want to solve? They might actually say to you, I want to make sure no dog ever goes hungry. That's not the same as being a vet, but the vet is the only thing that they know to say works with animals. Whereas if they can tell you what the problem is that they want to solve, what their mission or their passion or purpose is in life, you will then be able to say, well, you could work for an animal charity, or you could raise money for an animal charity, or you could work at a zoo, there are so many different options that open up when you ask somebody, what problems do you want to solve, rather than what do you want to be?
Coming back to your point about how learning is done in corporation universities, that you don't have the right to fail, you don't have the space to fail. I was thinking that in the area of finding our passion, we need to promote more this idea of experimentation. Like, we might not know exactly what we want to do, but we need to create micro tests, micro experimentation that if they're valid, that means that, oh, there is a chance that this could be my passion. Instead of having like already at 15 years old in Switzerland, by the way, you decide at 15 years old if you are going to university or not, and what you are going to be special, more or less the area of specialization, which is what the hell. At 15, I didn't know anything. I- Is this idea of experimentation something that is one realistic, or does it fuck up even more our brain with all of the things that we have already?
It will if we haven't got the facility to experiment. Because for some people, they have to get a job. The survival depends on that. And it's really difficult to tell that person, find something you like, you've got to, because they're thinking, how am I going to put the next meal on the table? So
Yeah.
for some, it's really not possible. However, this is a lovely little exercise you can try if you are in that position of, I don't want to leave my job until I get the next job, but I don't know what job I want to go to. And I don't want to just jump into more of the same, which is the bigger problem. If you do not have the benefit of the space or the finances to experiment, at least try this. Have two columns. And on this side, write skills. And the other side, write strengths. And and what you're going to do is you're going to write down all the things that you're good at. Everything you're good at. But then I want you to divide it into skills are things that I'm good at, but they exhaust me. And strengths are things that I'm good at, but they energize me. Both of which you can get better at, both of which you can do more. But these exhaust me, these energize me. Now, I'll give you my own example here. I am exceptionally good at organizing, exceptionally good. I can take productions internationally. I can organize events. I'm exceptionally good. I hate it. I hate it with an absolute passion. It's boring. It's stressful. I get anxious even thinking about organizing it. But the problem is my friends, they say to me, Audrey, you're so good at organizing. You organize the next get together. And I just think, you know what? If you want it that badly, you organize it. Unless I really want to get together with you lot, I'm not going to bloody bother anymore. So organizing is one of my skills. I'm good at it. But if I get promoted and promoted and promoted on it, I'm going to be really depressed by the time I'm CEO of my event organization company. And a good example of that was before I went into teaching, I was an event organizer. That was my job. That was my first job. I was an event organizer. And it's very sad. We used to organize the same event in lots of different Audi dealerships. I could tell you the postcode, not anymore, but I used to be able to tell you the postcode of every single Audi dealership across the country. That was how bad it was. But anyway, organization is one of my skills. Strengths, I would say teaching is one of my strengths. Presenting is one of my strengths. Performing is one of my strengths. And I love doing those things. Yes, I can improve on them. Yes, I can always get better. But they are things that energize me. When I come off this podcast, I'm going to be buzzing because I've had such a great time. And if you tell me to organize the podcast or even edit the podcast, I'd be like, but I'm good at it. So the problem is we get promoted and promoted on our skills a lot of the time. And the reason for that is the brain going, dopamine, 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 yay! Because dopamine is powerful, but it's not very discerning. So that's the problem. If you find yourself, I don't know, writing presentations and actually hate it, but it turns out you're quite good at it, or maybe you end up writing spreadsheets, you hate it, but you're quite good at it, you'll get told, oh, well done. And that little boost, that little dopamine hit is enough to take you to the next project where you do the same thing. And then you do it again and you do it again and then you get promoted. And that's where I see most of my clients is they've got promoted on their skills and they just don't know what their strengths are anymore. So it's simple. These are the two things you're good at, but one of them drains you, one of them energizes you. Work that out and then look for a job in this category rather than this one.
It's a good exercise, really. We'll use it with some two ladies that I know. Anyways, we tend to embrace the detour in retrospect, like after once it worked out, especially. What do you say to that person sitting in the middle of the mess right now who cannot see the point of it, making the detours, trying new stuff, making your life a little bit less predictable, but maybe more meaningful or in the way too?
Well, the first is don't beat yourself up over where you are right now, because where you are now is a culmination of decisions that you made at the time, which were the best decisions at the time. So don't add guilt and beating yourself up to the stress that you're already feeling. What I would do is sort of ask the question, well, okay, where are you now and where did you start? This is not to celebrate where you are, because, we know it may not be a nice place for you, but where did you start? We all started somewhere. And wherever that was, you will be able to find some sort of achievement. Maybe it's not the achievement you want to have or the one that you want to have in the future, but in charting that path, you will at least know, well, I was here and now I'm here, and that has meant I've moved on. Then you start asking yourself more coaching questions, such as, okay, well, what were your highs and lows along the way? What did you enjoy? What didn't you enjoy in that little pathway? And what helped you? What hindered you? What happened when you weren't motivated? What you're doing is you're creating a bit of a blueprint to remind yourself that you have taken journeys before and that you are capable of making those changes. And it might just be you've lost the map. That's all. So this is refinding that map and realigning where you need to go. But once you know, well, do you know what? I have taken a journey before. It might have landed me in a place I didn't want to be, but I have done it. And on the way, I really enjoyed meeting people. I really didn't enjoy learning new skills, or I really didn't enjoy having to make money, or whatever that might be. You at least begin to understand yourself a bit more. And then as you ask the other questions, such as, well, who helped me along the way? Maybe it's not necessarily going back to that person, but maybe it's telling you, well, I need a mentor, because maybe you're trying to get out of this situation you're in by yourself, because that's habitually what you've become conditioned to. And if you think back and go, well, having a tutor or having a mentor or having somebody to, even online or reading a book about it, that helped me, then the same thing might help you at least shift the status quo. It's not necessarily about giving you the answer right now, but one thing you can guarantee, if you do nothing, you will remain stagnant in the same place. But if you do something, even if it's small, even if it's just reaching out to somebody, not only might that propagate a bigger change, but what it has done is it's told your nervous system, it's told your brain, it doesn't have to be like this. I can do something a little bit different. It's back to pushing into the stretch zone once more. So just making one little change, doing something a little bit differently.
Audrey, out of the books that you have written, if you have to advise someone, this is the book that you should start with, because you have many now, in order to, regarding the topic of linearity or a little bit of messiness in our lives, which one would you recommend to our audience?
Having a favorite book's like having a favorite child, isn't it?
Yeah, come on. You always have a favorite child.
Of course you do. Excuse me. No, anyway, I would say start with The Leader's Guide to Resilience.
Yeah.
Because that is the most practical. And one thing they're all practical. They've all got tips and tools, but mindfulness is a lot more about meditations. And so the practical tools there are much more about calming the mind and calming the nervous system. So if that's what you want, then fine. But if you want the more practical tools that I've been using in this particular podcast, then it would be The Leader's Guide to Resilience is the better one to start with. And on the subject of non-linearity, these are not cover to cover books. None of my books are. They're all dip in, dip out, go where you need it at the time. They're all written as workbooks. So there's spaces to write your thoughts, experiment with what's going on, reflect on them. So it's not linear. You use the chapters that are going to suit you at the moment until such time they don't suit you anymore. Then find another chapter.
I will put definitely the link to that book below this episode. How can people reach you out, Audrey? Questions not only about linearity, because what you cover is all the major challenges that human beings working are having today. So how can they ask you any of these questions?
My website is the best place to find me, and that is www.draudreyt.com. If you just Google Audrey Tang, though, be really careful, because often the Deputy Digital Minister, the Taiwanese Digital Minister, comes up. Now, she's also Audrey Tang. She's not me. She is absolutely brilliant at AI and all of those things. I am Audrey Tang, psychologist. So www.dr.
I will put also that link below this episode. Audrey, it was really nice, refreshing to speak to you. I really loved it. Thank you very much for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for, again, such a wonderful conversation, which just did a beautiful meander and covered all bases at the same time. I think that was just such a wonderful, energizing experience. Thank you.
Thanks.